मंत्रालय की पेशकश।
This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on strengthening bilateral ties between India and France. The participants are T.C.A. Rangachari, former ambassador, and Anubha Rohatgi, anchor.
French President Emmanuel Macron is on a 2-day visit to India, and he was also the chief guest of this year's Republic Day parade. To discuss the importance of India-France relations, I'm now joined by former diplomat T.C.A. Rangachari. Mr. Rangachari, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. And let me also join you in greeting my fellow countrymen on the 75th Republic Day.
This was President Macron's third visit to India. He's the sixth French leader to be the chief guest at India's Republic Day parade, thus making France the country with the most representations on this occasion. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Mr. Macron have met each other half a dozen times in the last 1 year, including Mr. Modi's state visit to France in July, and the two leaders meeting each other on the sidelines of various multilateral summits. And India and France have completed 25 years of this strategic partnership. Now, the reason I'm sharing this is that these numbers, in a way, underline the significance and strength of India-France bilateral relations. So, how do you see the relationship between the two countries?
You're quite right in regard to the numbers that you have cited. There is a symbolic part to the relationship and there is a substantive part to the relationship. And I think on both counts, India-France relationship has not only stood the test of time, but has also gone from strength to strength. Now, when you say that this is the sixth visit by a French president to India for the Republic Day ceremony, that is the symbolic part. But the substantive part is that on each of the visits, we have built on what we had achieved till then. And what has happened in the course of the recent years, the last 5 or 6 years, this period that on our side, Prime Minister Modi, and on their side, President Macron, they have meeting each other. We have not just incrementally, but we have in leaps and bounds, we have increased the level of cooperation between the two countries. One of the things that I noted last year when Prime Minister had visited France for the Bastille Day ceremonies, on the education side, from the current level of around 10,000 students, the target was to raise it to 30,000 students in the coming 3 to 5 years. Now, if we are able to achieve that, just look at the way in which the new generation in India and the new generation in France will be able to relate to each other, understand each other, and to be able to imbibe from each other's cultures, civilization, and also develop a basis for cooperation, which will be beneficial for both countries on the basis of understanding and friendship. That would be a huge, huge advantage to both societies and the governments and to the two countries. That is just one instance. But if you go back, you spoke of 25 years of strategic partnership. 25 years would take us roughly to the period when India had the nuclear tests in 1998.
Yes.
And the sanctions that were imposed on India and the difficulties that we faced for about 2 years or so thereafter, till the powers which imposed the sanction on India came to realize that these sanctions should not have been imposed in the first instance, and B was trying to exclude from the international community the contribution of one of the most major countries, which has traditionally, historically contributed to the establishment and maintenance of peace and security in the world. And in that context, our cooperation in France was very, very telling in the way in which France acted as an interlocutor with us and also communicated very effectively the views of India and whatever it was that we were thinking in terms of our own future post the nuclear tests to the rest of the world, particularly the P5 members, who were the ones who were in the forefront of imposing sanctions on us.
So, you said that India-France relationship has stood the test of time. And of course, you've mentioned the very difficult time or the phase when India conducted its nuclear test in 1998. And in fact, France was one of the Western powers, the major Western power, which stood with India at that point of time. And of course, we entered into a civil nuclear agreement with France in 2008. And France has always been, like you said, a steadfast partner. Would you agree that the reason for this that both the countries believe in a multipolar international order and the concept of strategic autonomy?
Okay, now these are two separate issues that we are talking about. One is on the nuclear cooperation side and the other is on the strategic autonomy side. So let's deal with the strategic autonomy straight away. Historically, France has taken the view that France must retain its strategic autonomy. And there was a phase when France also withdrew from the NATO, and it was several years out of it. And France has also been a proponent of establishing a European defense force. Now, that defense force has not come to very much. It is not very effective when compared to a military alliance like NATO, or earlier on in the earlier version, the Comecon that was led by the erstwhile Soviet Union. But the thought behind it was that we should be capable on our own strength. Now, that kind of thinking, to my mind, originated in India, what is now popularly known as Atmanirbhar, self-reliance. Self-reliance was a doctrine that came to us naturally and in terms of our own understanding of our own history, because we had seen in history that in periods when we did not depend on our own selves, on our own resources, our own capabilities, we very often succumbed to foreign pressures and we even succumbed to foreign occupation. And therefore, this self-reliance and everything that goes with self-reliance became virtually an axiomatic theme for all governments in India since 1947. So strategic autonomy is something that we share. What we have to do now is to build in cooperation with each other, in collaboration with each other, the wherewithal to give substance to that concept of self-reliance. That India and France are working together on the renewables in a very, very constructive and collaborative way. And I would recall to you the International Solar Alliance, the initiators of which were India and France, and on the basis of which today, against a target of around 100 gigawatts, we are able to produce something like 75 gigawatts of energy out of renewables, solar in particular. So therefore, this collaboration, this cooperation between India and France is extensive. It has stood, again, I repeat myself, it stood the test of time. And on the way in which things are proceeding and the relationship that has been established between President Macron on one side and Prime Minister Modi on the other side, I am very hopeful that this will help both societies work together in a way in which it will benefit both countries, both governments, both societies. And in this, one very important factor that I would like to emphasize is the requirement to have greater collaboration, particularly so in terms of numbers of students, greater collaboration in education.
The fact that, you're talking about the education sector, President Macron, today morning itself, he has tweeted about this number that he's looking forward and he's determined to make that happen, that 30,000 students, should be going over to France to study. Now, moving away from that, defense ties have always been a strong underlying pillar in the bilateral relationship of India and France. It's evident from the fact that France is now the second largest defense exporter to India after Russia. And in fact, today itself, an India-France defense industrial roadmap and an agreement on defense space partnership has been agreed upon. And there's also been an industrial partnership that has been agreed upon between Tata and Airbus helicopters for production of H-125 helicopters. How would you describe this defense partnership and its significance?
The defense partnership is something which is very substantial, true in money terms. It is true in terms of also the requirements on the Indian side. When I was serving in France as India's ambassador, we had an agreement for Scorpion submarines, which have since been produced in Indian docks. Now, all of these agreements that you have cited and willingness on the part of the French to sell sophisticated, highly technical defense equipment to India is something which is to be welcome. But I think we need to move beyond a buyer-seller relationship between the two countries. We have in India, we have the capabilities, we have the scientific and technical manpower, we have the institutions, we have land and other facilities. We need to develop a real true collaboration where it's a partnership. It's not simply a buyer-seller relationship, but a partnership in which India will also contribute to the development of systems that would go into whatever defense equipment is being manufactured, produced in France or any other Western country. And so that we move to a higher stage from just being a customer. So what that means in practice would be that we would look at our requirement, we would list out what is it that we need, and on the basis of that, on the basis of our own capabilities, develop the products required, scientific, technical areas that have to be worked out, collaborate with the French, and the manufacturing would be done either entirely in India or partly in India, partly in France. Because the advantage of such a collaboration would be that we would then not only be serving each other's needs, but we would also be in a position to explore and exploit third country markets for those
Right.
products.
Now, coming to in the last few years, Indian-France ties have gained a geopolitical angle as well, especially in the Indian Ocean region, where France has its overseas territories. Would you say that France calling India its key partner in the Indo-Pacific region, and both countries being part of trilateral agreements such as one with Australia and another with UAE, bears testimony to this fact?
Yes, you're quite right in citing the overseas positions of France. You might also add another factor to that, which is that there are very large number of French citizens in India also. So the overseas possessions have French citizens, but because of the fact that India also have a large number of French citizens, I believe I was reading that even in the Republic Day parade today, there's a certain number of overseas, how would you put it, French citizens of Indian origin participating. So in the French Legion, etc., and so on. So now, as far as the strategic cooperation in the oceanic regions is concerned, first of all, India is a country which has got a very, very large coastline, and therefore our coastal interests, our seafaring interests, our blue economy interests, our interest in maintaining the safety and security of the sea lanes. Now, look at what is happening in the Red Sea right now, the attacks that are taking place on commercial shipping, and it's not restricted to any particular country. We are in proximity. We have the capability. The Indian Navy has the capability. So we have to be part of any system that is developed, that is evolved, in order to guarantee the safety and security of the sea lanes, safety and security of commercial shipping in the Indian Ocean region, in the Red Sea region, and the vicinity. There are a number of areas which should motivate, which should propel countries like India, France to work together and develop collaborative policies and methodologies and capabilities so that we are actually able to translate our goals, our vision into concrete action.
So, so far as trade ties are concerned, France is only the 11th largest investor in India, and it's the 8th largest trading partner. In fact, in 2022-23, bilateral trade between the two countries was only 19.2 billion US dollars. So would you say that's one area that needs to be looked into, that needs to be encouraged and worked upon?
What we have to look at is not simply the trade figure in isolation of India and France, but in a comparative sense. Let us also look at the trade figures between France and China, France and United States, and we will find that India is a very small fraction. We have enormous scope for expanding the bilateral trade. Now, how we do that? What are the products that are of interest, Indian products that are of interest to France, vice versa? What is it that we can bring into the trade basket? This is something that we have to do a lot of thinking, and also we have to incentivize our companies, our commercial organizations to look at how we can expand this trade basket. So once we have the trade basket, once we have the strategic security basket, we have the defense basket, we have the people-to-people basket, we have the education, space, nuclear, these baskets, then you can see how wide and how expansive the relationship between the two countries.
Speaking to us, Mr. Rangachari.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on strengthening bilateral ties between India and France. The participants were T.C.A. Rangachari, former ambassador, and Anubha Rohatgi, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com. gmail.com or WhatsApp on 92890 94044.